Not gonna make breakfast. Okay, guys, welcome back. February 1st, 21st, February 21st, 2026. And today we're just again, and this is for all my students who are looking for work and going through a tough time looking for work. Because today we're not just talking about finding a job. We're going to talk about positioning yourself in a specific field with intention, clarity, and confidence. You breaking into a specific field of sales, technology, um, anything, uh, any field, doesn't matter what it is. It could be broad. It isn't about sending hundreds of resumes. It's about understanding the value you bring. It's identifying where you fit and learning how to communicate your skills in a way that your makes employers see you as an asset, not just an applicant. The market doesn't really reward your effort or effort alone. It rewards preparation, alignment, and professionalism. Over the next phase of your journey, I want you to think differently, not how to get hired, but how do I become the obvious choice? Never want to assume. Let's focus on building that version for you. You're not competing against everyone in the job market. You're competing against the version of yourself that isn't fully prepared. You know, if if you want to enter that specific field, you need more knowledge. You need more technical knowledge. You need more sales knowledge. You need more knowledge in general. You need clarity. You need discipline. You need communication skills. And you definitely need resilience. Employers don't hide potential, they hire demonstrated value. But remember, these can also be assumptions from the interviewer, right? And you know, the you're gonna focus on how to present, you're gonna focus on how to position, and you're gonna prove that value because assumptions made by interviewers, yeah, they're subtle, they're just and they're dangerous as well too, right? And assumptions can distort the evaluation and lead to mislead talent and poor hiring decisions. Assuming somebody was high, assuming somebody went into the interview and had 20 years experience or 10 years experience or 5 years experience and knew everything, right? And you could tell the way assumptions are made by interviewers, right? And a strong resume equals a strong performer. The interview doesn't know that. They make assumptions, right? They say, study this, do this, take this, you know, big brown companies, prestigious interviews, 5 years experience in a big company, you know, impressive titles, high competence. But the reality here is the brand association doesn't equal the contribution. You can't tell in 1 hour You can't tell about somebody in 1 hour. It doesn't make sense. You can say this guy doesn't know anything, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't know anything. How do you know? Because you made assumptions? Because you thought he looked good today? Or she looked good today? Or because what she had on paper was indicative of who he was and not who you thought he was. The professional approach is to describe your specific contribution to that project, the XYZ, yes, but what measurable impact did you personally drive? Don't label somebody as not knowing anything or incompetent because he tells you something. In what, 5 minutes? You're gonna make that assumption? No, you can't do that. Test depth. Multiple rules, another assumption. Lack of commitment. What does that mean? Multiple roles in short periods mean instability. That doesn't mean nothing. You're assuming, interviewers. You're all assuming. Reality, promotion, contract rules, startup exits, career experimentation. What were you optimizing for in each move? You, the interviewer, what were you doing? What would need to exist here for you to stay long term, interview? Don't just look for your timeline. Look for the intention, people's best intention. It's all on paper. You you never want to be nervous, but the nervous, okay, so nervous equals non-confident, right? And I'm not going to write this down because I want you guys to write your notes for now. I'm not making notes on this because it's not important, but I want you to focus and I want you to get your pen and paper like I always tell you every time you at the end of the starting of the movie, and I want you to write notes, and I want you to rewatch this 3 times for the last X amount of time that I was online. I want you to rewind and fast forward. I want you to listen to this over and over and over again because one, you got strong resumes equal strong performance. I explained that to you. Job hopping, lack of commitment. That doesn't mean nothing. I could be a business and I want a job hop. That's my business. I don't need to be at a company for 5 years to fit a profile or portfolio. Or you don't have to be that kind of person, right? Especially students who are just coming out of university. And I do this a lot for my training. I give them that hands on, I give them those projects. I have my live videos, I get them interactive. You're not a boss. You're getting ready for doing that. It's making that assumption on someone, getting them ready for that, training them for that material, training them for the real life scenario and what they want to do. And yes, that is true. And again, job hopping, lack of commitment. People will leave jobs because the lack of leadership or a lack of training or lack of this or lack of that. But meanwhile, they're looking for people, but nobody wants to train. Nobody wants to tell people what to do. Everybody wants to be on that leadership, on that pedestal, standing on business, but don't realize that the ownership is up at the top, stringed by others. What were you optimizing for in each move? In this lack of job hopping, lack of commitment. What would you need to exist here for you to stay long term? What would you need? They need you. You don't need them. Nervous, not confident. Here's another one. Assumptions. Candidate is anxious. They lack capability. Head down. See that many times. Head down. Interviews are high pressure, unnatural environments. Some of the best performers are not polished interviewers. You know, let's step out of the interview mode for a moment. Walk me through how you would normally approach the situation at work. Professional, right? You're being professional. Remove performance pressure to see authenticity. You need to see them live. You need to see their authenticity. Yeah, that's on paper. You should be able to prepare yourself instead of asking stupid questions. It's on paper. You need an example? It's on paper. You need a product? It's on paper. You need a system? It's on paper. Overqualified equals flight risk. This is another one. They'll leave as soon as something better comes along. You got the interviewer. They'll leave as soon as something better comes along. Remember, they need you. You don't need them. And that, honestly, it might have its negative, it might have its advantages and disadvantages, right? Once on board, what can I show you? You see me on paper, but once on board, what can I show you? Think about that. They'll leave as soon as something comes better, right? What motivates you at this stage of your career? What are you moving towards? Great questions. Work life balance, mission alignment, still on paper. Gaps. Who cares about the gaps? It's a rule that was put into place where, you mean a gap means underperformance or issues. Who cares? Could it be family care? Could it be health, education, entrepreneur? I noticed gaps between this and this. What happened during that period? None of your business. It's not about knowing the gap. It's about what the person can show you. And I notice time and time again, people aren't getting jobs because of these stupid things. And people are teaching them what to do. They need you. You don't need them. Most articulate candidate must be strongest. So listen, even if you have agents or you have somebody who's an agent, right? You know, your articulate candidate must be the strong. Okay, you've gone through 100 resumes. You've gone through 100 people, men and women or both. And the reality is the confidence can't mask lack of depth. Quiet confidence candidates, obviously, quiet people, not just people who are feeding off your vampire energy. They say you can't prove certain things, but whatever's show them what you can do. It's not what you did before. It's about now, future, and what you can prove. And to be able to articulate that in an interview, it makes sense. The assumptions. cultural fit, having a gut feeling, interviewers versus professional interviewers. I've seen interviews with the guy just hired 5 months ago and he's already interviewing somebody. You move too fast. Are you sure are you really leading those initiatives? Kind of becomes defensive. You're being defensive. Who wants to work for somebody like you? The introduction always matters. You come intrusive that way, right? Even if you're a happy guy, like hey, you're shooting the shit. Yeah, it's as if you're going into an interview and you're becoming part of them, but not in 1 hour. It doesn't make sense. How do you trust someone I don't know? Yes, I get a lot of people that say that, right? Like, why should we trust you? Again, tell me about a time you made a mistake that impacted your team. These are some great questions to ask to give you those kind of scenarios to trust. People, you should be able to trust. Remember, everybody that comes or everybody that sends you that resume, you should be able to trust them or not. But it's also whether they can trust you now. They've given you their time. It's not a race. It's not a bunch of medals that somebody should have. You're hiring somebody, and assumptions are big, and that's the psychology. And there's also the psychology around assumptions, right? Like for students or hiring managers, even when you're hiring new students, yeah, it's a little tough. It's a little green, but then it comes to a time where it's like, okay, do I train green, and then evolve like uh, apprenticeships? No, even if they're apprentice, it makes sense. They're telling you they have no experience, they just have school. Then I would understand, right? But if you got somebody who's got 20 years experience on paper, and it's like you assume something, even if you both have 25 years experience, and the interview assumes something. How do you know? How do you assume? How do I trust someone I don't know? Do I trust them? Do I trust them coming into an interview with what I'm telling you? Everything of that. It happens in life. And students will have to understand. Students, new hires, new people coming into the force, rich or poor, no knowledge or no knowledge. You're just coming off, for example, you've got a degree in medicine and you're going into now become a systems administrator. Yeah, if you can show what you've done on paper is one thing. But how do you trust that person? Like, how is it that you can actually look at this person and say, he's got this on paper, he told you this, you made your assumptions, but meanwhile he's like, you start off with a quiet first 2 weeks of that person, and him being quiet, and you're not really seeing results, and you're expecting him to do certain things that you know weren't part of his job description or the job description that came out for. And that's happened in the past. He's got years of experience. He told you what he knew. You've seen it on paper. What else did you want? But now you're giving them other work that's loaded on top of that, or just certain things where it's like, I paid you to do this, now do this. Right? Tell me about a time you made a mistake. Yeah, you want to know about a time, but can you tell a time when you help somebody do that? You help somebody um, resolve that mistake that impacted your team. What were you doing at that time, managers? What were you doing at that time, leaders? How did you handle that, leaders? What made you become part of that? Integrity shows up in how someone owns failure, right? There's a big psychology. The brain prefers shortcuts. Professionals will resist shortcuts. They'll replace assumptions, right, with secured curiosity. Assumptions usually close conversations. Questions open insight. They need you, candidates, prospects, right? And this is where the prospects, like, I just gave you a resume. This is my life. I worked hard for something. I've done this. I've achieved this. I've proved this to many people. What do I need to do to prove something to you now? And that's where the assumptions are made of him not telling you something right, or him not explaining something properly, or not giving you that XYZ bullshit. Or in an interview, you have somebody who turns their camera off. You can't even turn a camera on. You're hiding something, interviewer. Or coming in cocky, or overbearing, or over demanding in the interview. And I've seen tonal language like, ha 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 ha, rich versus poor. How do you act like that? Structured interview, scorecard template. Yeah, that doesn't make nothing. Honestly, I'll tell you something right now. There's competency matrix that have been around. There's bias awareness. It doesn't mean shit. Training guide. It's all about what you feel, interviewer. So, you know, there are times where, trusting somebody, even the tone is curious too. Like, even the way you ask questions, or, like looking down. There's different scale cards that I have, and again, just ask me the structured sale interview scorecard. Again, it doesn't mean shit. I still don't care. You're not hiring off of time and quickness. It's ridiculous. It's a stupid way of telling somebody and showing how weak you are, and putting them on the spot is not a way to hire somebody. Not a way to hire somebody. Quota attainment, consistency, deal complexity, personal contribution. I've done thousands of interviews. I've listened to interviewers. I've interviewed the interviewers. Even if I didn't go for that job, I didn't want that job. It's like I have to force myself. I have to work or nothing, or I'm not going to pay bills. It shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't have to worry. You shouldn't have to do that. You get hired for an interview. I mean, sorry, you get called into an interview. You should be hired. Oh, let's test the competency. Oh, we hired somebody already, but let's keep going more. For what? Wasting time. The fuck is that? You hire somebody, you hire them on the spot. Your system went through 1,000 resumes. Yeah, you can't go through every resume, but your system went through 1,000 resumes. You chose 10. Then out of those 10, you throw it in again. You say, out of these 10, what are we looking for? What question can we ask this 10 people? And ask the same 10 questions. Maintain consistency. Everybody's different. If you had dealt before and called somebody else as a backup, like I've seen in the past, you should be fired. Get out of here. It's a game. This isn't a game. Ownership, psychology, sales, knowing the scores, how to rate the system. Again, message me the word. Today's word's going to be assume. Assume is you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. All right. I didn't write notes today. Again, I want you guys to write your own notes and share that. Again, I have different track records and different frameworks that you could use. This is to expand, like different objection handlings. I'm not gonna go. I can go through one or two different one, and you'll look at the interviewer and sellers. Like we can discount compared to what like as somebody who's going in there with their heart and soul. You could tell right away, right? This is too expensive. A lot now the governments are putting in timelines and they're putting in rates, so the rates are managed in range, right? That's okay. Again, they're just putting it out there, and that's up to you, the person who's looking for that job. It's like going in, you're owning your own business. You're going in for that job, and it doesn't, like I said, like you know now you're becoming like, okay, you've worked for this company for 20 years. Who do I hire? But in the first place, why are you busy? Why aren't you busy? Why aren't you doing the things that you're supposed to be doing with 20 years experience? How are you analyzing your business? What kind of business am I going to be working with? These are questions that you need to ask. And sometimes it's strategy. And it's all up here, the top, the leader who strings off the different, you know, interviewers, let's say, for example. And it's up to here that you have to kind of um train and show them how to do that. Like, if this doesn't vibe with what your company values are, then you don't know what you're doing, right? And you can have an HR department, you can have a legal department, you can have a financial department, you can have a director's department, right? You can have whatever the architectural product you can have, but it's the assumptions that you make and the scores that you're making that should make a difference, and the questions that you ask as well too. You have to timeline your questions, right? Like, it's, for example, when I walk, like, when do you walk away from a deal? You're testing discipline here, and this is how you test discipline. I'll try to close everything. If that doesn't come out of your mouth, you can't assume. If timeline, budget, or decision authority is unclear, I disqualify early. That's a strong seller, right? Or buyer. You just have to know how to do that. Like, what type of manager do you struggle with? People going into the interviews. Like, do you have that type of manager that you struggle with? Like, if they blame, red flag. If they describe growth tension, green flag. Green flag, green and red, right? And then the executive level sales hiring add-on. Like, for example, in sales, they're looking for the VPs, the enterprise. They're looking for forecast accuracy. They're looking for board level communication ability. How do you rescue a slipping $1 million deal? How do you rescue that? What do you look for? Not just I push harder. especially executives. I push harder. How do you rescue a slipping $1 million deal? You look for structured recovery approach. You look for stakeholder remap. You're looking for requalifying. You're looking for executive alignment, business quality goals, right? You know, final hiring principle here is don't hire charisma. Yeah, charisma's attitude. It's a great attitude in a business. Doesn't mean that he's got charisma and that's it. You hire different patterns. You should be able to be prepared before you go into the interview, right? Because I've been through interviews. It's like you ask me questions. It's like, okay, it's on the resume. And I've talked to many people about this before. I've had many interviews with different people, and I've come to a conclusion where I've surveyed about hundreds of people, and the best predictor of future performance is specific, repeatable past performance with ownership, not charisma, patterns in the resume. Again, you can't assume. You can't hire somebody off 1 hour. You don't know somebody in an hour. It's impossible, right? That to me is something that should be we should all be able to get it. We should all be able to find a job, right? And it's hard for people coming out of the um school or universities and they have that experience, and I've seen that a lot, or even guys with 20 years experience. It becomes a gender bias, man versus woman, rich versus poor, or looks versus non-looks, men versus women versus men, or both genders, right? Either or gender. So again, just expand your frameworks you referenced, organize clearly so you don't use them immediately. you know Look at the how your company jives with other people, right? Um, you know, even the another assumption too is reading the room. Have you guys ever heard that before? I don't know. It's a big reading the room scenarios. Have you guys ever, for anybody who has that? That's another thing that I want to discuss here. Um, and the reading the room objection, I've seen many times, and I'm sure you guys did too in the past. You know, it can't be just about what the manager says, like follow the leader, and what my manager says does. That to me is, allowing that person to arise from these assumptions, right? Should be objections that arise, especially in an interview or a sales context or selling a product, right? I'm gonna break something down here, and the psychology of reading the room is when somebody basically assumes based on body language, tone, or setting, they misinterpret intent. And the interview, they're fidgeting, they must be nervous or unqualified. No. So the prospect looks distracted, they aren't interested. He's reading his paper, his head is down. They cross their arms. They must disagree. It's like mastering the art of something an FBI agent would want to do. Be yourself. Let them be themselves. You can't manage that. You can't assume. And the danger, these are assumptions, not facts. Acting on them, you know, me as a person, you're derailing my trust. Report, and especially the evaluation, if I'm gonna be, looking at that for the evaluation part of it. There are specific rookie versus professional handling. Like, for example, sales call, ignore prospects' subtle cues, react emotionally. Professionals, we test the assumption. I've noticed you seem concerned about X. Is that correct? Professional, professional question. I notice you seem concerned about this in the interview, even if it's me to the interviewer. I've noticed you seem concerned about X. Is that correct? I want to make sure I understand your perspective. I'm validating here. First and foremost, right? I'm not assuming that the up is that I'm not assuming there's an opposition, especially from body language or even from argues, right? And that's in team calls, Zoom calls, but on a sales call, cold call, like you're on a phone, you know, I noticed you seem, or even a live feed, right? I noticed you seem, or I noticed you sound concerned about X. Is that true? Is that correct? I noticed you sound. I noticed you seem concerned, right? I noticed you seem concerned. I noticed you sound concerned. You don't seem confident. Are you really qualified? I prefer to show through examples rather than body language. You seem hesitant. I don't think this is for us. What we need more info before committing. Reading hesitation as rejection can mislead or assume, right? I prefer to show you examples rather than body language. You seem hesitant. I don't think this is for us. We need more info. We need more info before committing. Reading hesitation as rejection can mislead. You cross your arms, you disagree. I'm like I said, these are just social cues. You're not an FBI agent looking for the drug cartel. I'm just cold, not opposed to the plan. Remember that. I'm just cold, not opposed to the plan. Right? Example. Uh, I can tell you're nervous. This role isn't for you. I noticed some hesitation. Can you walk me through your experience? And this is you as somebody who's a professional here, looking for that position, right? Or that sale, right? So sales professions. I noticed some hesitation. Can you walk me through your experience with X, Y, Z? Or let's say this is a sales call. You don't sound interested. Maybe I sense you might have concerns about implementation. Can we explore those together? You don't sound interested. Maybe should I call back? Never say that in a call, right? I sense you might have concerns about implementation, right? Prefer to show you examples rather than body language, right? These are great questions in an interview and sales call, and you gotta be able to. You don't have to memorize these, and the thing is, I hate about interviews is you think you gotta memorize everything. You don't. Shouldn't have to. You don't need to. Like 20, 30 years ago, that's the way things were done. Like, we used to read books and, do specific things and projects, and showcase those projects. But I can't bring every single solitary project to you. It's not something my company wants to do or tell you. Don't act on perceived cues alone. And these are some great takeaways, clarifying questions, evaluate their behavior, your behavior, evidence, because it's equal, it's mutual. We need more info before reading hesitation as reaction. Yeah, you seem hesitant. I don't think this is for us. I could tell you're nervous. Maybe this role isn't for you. What do you mean I'm nervous? You could say, I noticed some hesitation. Can you walk me through your experience with XYZ? They need you. Turn these objections into opportunities, right? Use that perception as like kind of a conversation starter rather than just judging people, right? You can't just judge somebody, right? And again, message me the word assume and I'll send you over some of that assumption stuff. And I have great structured interview scripts that I have here, like walk me through your career. decisions and what led you here, and like even you towards the interviewer, like you can ask these types of questions for each role. What were you hired to fix or improve? Like you get that answer, that you want to help them, and that'll help you answer your questions as well too. Because I'll tell you something right now. Professionals will ask these questions. Rookies will try to avoid it. Don't be scared. Like sometimes you have that specific time limit, but you shouldn't have to worry about time in an interview. The whole point is to communicate or purchase something or buy something, right? You're working with a salesman from Microsoft, and you hop on that sale like you love it. Anyway, so like I said, I have level frameworking for C-suite members. Like I said, I have specific scenarios that you can try on your own, one to one, or even give me a call. We could try it together. Even in sales specific hiring versions, like competencies, role plays, like to sell me this pen, sell me the water, sell me the plant, sell me a lighter, sell me anything. It's smooth, great, cold calling face to face. They like even these bias aware, like they only work there a year, they must be unreliable. How do you know? They are too confident, maybe arrogant. How do you know? They seem nervous, maybe not capable. How do you know? What evidence supports this belief in one day, in 1 hour? What evidence contradicts that? Am I reacting to style? Did I test this assumption directly? Did you even test it? Did you even test it? Again, this isn't an FBI interview. Vague answers, like talk about growth. Break down the problems logically. Like, what did you do, interviewer, where you need him? Use I, failures. Give all your failures. Let let them feel uncomfortable. What about that? Talk about growth. Talk about transparency. Don't just blame somebody. Like, how do you know what they did or not? How are you gonna avoid discussing setbacks? How are you gonna, avoid like somebody gives you a vague answer? Like, yeah, you can say that. They're given that time, but how do you know? Like, you should have had that prepared through the resume, and I've never seen that once. It's like a ghost coming to you for a glass of water. Think about that. Again, you can't decipher this in 1,000 people, but you should be able to decipher this in people that are, and not assume. Listen, guys, it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication. Even when I make these shows for you, these videos, and the more likes I get, the more interaction I get, the more parts to these videos I create. Right? As you move forward, remember this. Okay. Your resume, your professional gets you considered, but your mindset gets you hired. Like everybody has their own assumption about, what gets you hired. Stay curious, stay disciplined, keep refining your skills and highlight them and showcase them, right? and showcase them. Rejection isn't a verdict on your ability. It's feedback, right? The goal isn't just to find work. The goal is to build a career where that reflects on your strength, your character, and your long-term vision, right? Be intentional, be prepared, and most importantly, believe that you belong in the rooms you're walking into, right? Everybody has that mentality. I'll see you in the next one.